Welcome back to Real Estate Therapy. This is Cynthia Cummins. As many of you know, not a licensed therapist. I do have my real estate license and I renew it every 4 years right on time because without it, I can't practice. And I'm here today with Susan Burks, who is just an amazing human being. I'm going to let Susan. Susan, will you introduce yourself? Tell our viewers and listeners what you do. Uh,
Well, my background is really in art and curating, and that curating has really led me into the world of interiors in a wonderful and interesting way. I've always been a deep appreciator of, and at one point, a dealer in art and photography. And that sense of an attraction to beauty is really what led me to helping people find new ways to think about their homes, decorate their homes, go through remodels. So it's been an interesting avenue into this relationship that I have with interior design and real estate by dint of my connection to you.
that's great. Um, so I just can't help myself ask you this question. And this will be lost on some people who are listening here, but I just want to know how beautiful you think my sweater is, the way that it's matching these kitchen cabinets behind me.
I just
Have
find
you?
it so delightful and it's so you, the color, the sunniness. I just love the whole thing. Well done.
For you who can't see me and my kitchen cabinets, it's a kind of chartreuse yellow, kind of greenish yellow uh, sweater and cabinets that just happened to match. And I didn't plan it, but I what it puts me in mind of is I find that I derive a whole lot of pleasure from letting my eye roam through a space. Wherever I am, on an airplane, in my office, seeing a new house for the first time, and I love making those. I don't know, those kind of visual connections, like picking up on patterns. This matchy match sweater cabinet thing. Uh, a flower that just happens to match the signage um, at the plant store. What is it about human beings that, if you're tuned in, why does that make us feel? Why can that make us feel good when we behold beauty or symmetry or things that match? Where
You
does
know,
that come from?
it really actually goes back in a very deep and innate way to how we formed as human beings in our very early primitive survival oriented selves. We were looking for patterns. We were looking for things that made sense in the vistas ahead of us, whether it indicated that there was fertility there in terms of growing food or there was an environment that was going to sustain us. We're also it's very interesting the way our brains connect the symmetry and the patterns that we see externally with our own symmetry and patterns internally. There's a recognition, there's a sense of identity that we see in the external environment. And those kinds of relationships are very pleasing. And color equally has a powerful effect on us. Colors will enliven us, they will calm us. And this isn't just because of the blue makes us calm, but there is a neurological relationship to colors because of the wavelengths of these particular each color's wavelengths will affect us in different ways. So there's a lot to it. There's a lot of science behind it. And it's something I really love paying a lot of attention to in interiors.
Yeah, I mean, can you think of an example of? I mean, I don't know. For example, somebody saying to me, uh, I want to paint this." Actually, I knew somebody who the kid's bedroom was orange, and I thought, "Whoa, this is okay." I get it that it kind of goes with the San Francisco Giants, right? Um, but or the 49ers, but orange, that's a lot to wake up to every
It's a lot to
day.
try to sleep to as well. Orange is a very activating color. It's a great color to have in an office or in a room where there's going to be a lot of energy expressed and you really want to get activated. And some people may not have any trouble sleeping in an orange room, but
Mhm.
for most of us, it's going to be very hard to calm down and to find that more restful space with a color like that echoing off the walls.
So that's probably because orange, I'm just guessing, way back when, orange was fine as long as it was the orange of a controlled campfire flame, not a campfire, a fire in a cave
Right.
opening, but orange coming at you through the forest was probably not as desirable because that
Well,
meant a wildfire or something, right?
there's that, and the fact that much like sound, color has different speeds at which it moves. So red is a very high frequency color if you related it to sound. And the same thing with orange, whereas blues and greens are wavelengths that move much slower. And
Mm.
so our brain, our own neurology is going to be moving in different wavelengths as well when we perceive those colors. It's affecting our own brain waves.
Right, which is why I have a vehicle that actually matches my sweater and these cabinets. It's definitely yellow because I think besides orange and ahead of red, it's the most easily seen on the highway,
Mhm.
right? You know, like I want people to see me coming, right? Um, that was a whole segue into saying that I think a lot of people don't give much thought to uh, why design or color or patterns or the way furniture is arranged, the way you set up a room, interior design, why it matters. And they may not appreciate on a deeper level how it affects us. Like, I find sometimes there are, I'll meet someone who uh, their house is in chaos all the time. And this may kind of correlate with a somewhat dysregulated personality. Like they may be really anxious and stressed out. And I might think in that situation, boy, we need to just declutter and get some calmer color on the walls and simplify so that there can be some breathing that goes on here. Do you find yourself working with people who are that clueless? I don't mean, do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Well, I think more than anything, I have found more and more interior design can be a lot more prescriptive. Most of us are dealing with some kind of sleeplessness or anxiety or the need for more focus or the need for more energy. There's some thing that we want and need to bring into our lives. Now,
yep.
the exterior environment is just a mirror in many cases of that. And so there are ways in which to, as you said, declutter or change the color. But more than anything, it's to look at what kind of feeling and sense do you want to have in the spaces that you live in? And what do you feel that you need more of, or what would you like to have more of? And then how can color and texture and light and sound and aroma all be curated together to create an environment that's more supportive of that? It might be you need more time alone. It might need you want to support more time together. So each of these things has an approach that can really support that. And I would say it's a little different than traditional interior design that is now becoming more and more aware of how we are affected in these many ways. But also, it's not just about creating a beautiful environment. Sometimes those can be very sterile or lacking in the textures and the colors that we might need. So I sort of divide what traditional interior design has been, has come to be known with a different approach that I like to call dwell being. That is really the name of my company. And it's really about how do we dwell in well being and how do we
Yes.
use interior design to support that.
To support that.
Hmm.
I know, I think everybody listening or watching has been may have visited a space. Maybe they're lucky enough to live in a space, but they visited a space where there's some, and it could be a public space or a restaurant or it's a museum, whatever, where you don't, you may not even understand why, but you just feel different. It's
Hmm.
vibrating at a different, on a different frequency. You feel calm. And I think it's a real art
Yeah.
and a science to translate that into an actual physical space. And now I know a little bit about your work. When you're working with people, that's where you start, right? You start with, tell us how you begin. You begin with what is wanted.
Yeah, it's a subtle thing because people aren't always clear about why they need what they need or why they want what they want. I mean, there may just be, I love this color and I want as much of it around me as possible. Or this palette is what pleases me. How can we build around that? It may not be about how do I deal with an emotional state, but underneath that are other things that I begin to pick up. And so my initial conversations are a lot about what are you going to be doing in this space? What is this space used for? How are you individually and as a family or as a partnership going to and want to be together here? And then what are the specific needs that are happening? And I begin to build not only a framework around what needs to happen in the house in terms of structural or new paint or new cabinets or very physical things, but how to embed those activities and those needs within that. And so we had a lot of fun working on your space that way because it involved both the time away, the private office or room to do work, as well as the gathering spaces
Mhm.
and a lot of color, which was really fun.
Right, here I am, Miss Yellow. There's orange in my house. Not a I, yes, I loved that whole process so much. When I look back, it was one of the chief pleasures of owning a new home,
Mm.
where I was able, with your, with you as my ally and guide, and someone who listened carefully and paid attention, and then had all these skills and expertise and senses of a sensibility, uh, that where you were able to pick up on what I was about, which was pretty quirky. I think everybody's pretty quirky, um, but it was one of the chief pleasures of owning that real estate, getting to go on that journey of making the space a reflection of me and my life and what I wanted it to be for my family and my loved ones and my friends. I mean, somebody was telling me recently that they were, I think they asked for a referral. I may have given you your name to them. And I was just thinking how jealous I was that they were going to get to work with you and have someone partner with them this way. I
Well,
mean,
and I think what's really fun is my approach is that I like to see what does each client already have, what can be repurposed, what can be distributed or recurated in a way that it isn't always about getting a lot of new things. It's about using what one has.
right.
And the artwork for me is always a big focus because my background is a lot in the art world. And so having that fun of saying, oh, these unique pieces, how do they fit? How do we make them work in a way that amplifies the space?
Mhm.
And then not necessarily doing even, we didn't even do a big remodel job there. It was really, how do we take what's there and paint cabinets and take some cabinets down? But it was simpler than that. And yet it transformed the space in huge ways. So that kind of clever repurposing in collaboration
Mhm.
is really what's so fun to me because it's unique each time.
It is fun, and there's a parallel with my work as a real estate agent, um, and that what it's the same kind of guiding in just trying to find the base space, listening and trying to maybe look out for things that the client isn't realizing
Yeah.
or doesn't quite get, educating the client. And in my case, I remember, there were times where I had some idea that maybe I'd held on to that idea for a long time. It was part of my house fantasy. And I'd say, Susan, what about this? I don't know. What about this kaleidoscope collage that I want to feature in the kitchen? And you were able, through having established this great relationship with me, to say, just no.
I don't think I ever say just no.
No, you didn't say that. You said it so nicely. And I was able to think, yes, she's right. She's right.
But a lot of that is about putting it in context
Yeah.
because we are so often, when we're making a lot of big choices, we're looking at each one individually. And one of my roles is to help to consolidate and unify the space. The houses are not one room by itself or one area by itself. It is really how you flow through a house and how all the different pieces, they may tell very different stories, but how one room to the next still has that thread that you're trying to evoke throughout. And that's the place where I can be more objective and say, well, we could do that, or we might think about it this way.
Right.
So a lot of it is just being the voice of reason, which none of us do as well for ourselves as we can do for
Oh
others.
my gosh, it's so true. And I see houses all the time. I see a house where a lot of thought, a lot of thought went into the kitchen, for example, or the living room, or opening up the back of the house to the yard, or maybe the primary bedroom suite is just, you want to lie down and take a nap there. But then you go into the second bedroom or the bathroom, and it's just like, whoa, am I even in the same house? This doesn't, it's so jarring.
Well, and sometimes it's very much related to limited budgets, where you
Right.
really can't address every room. And that's where I find a lot of pleasure in looking for the inexpensive solutions that can bring that added piece of texture or that extra piece of color or some wonderful art or a great lamp, just pieces that can bring a room up to the level of the rest of the house without spending an arm and a leg. Because very often you do have to make those compromises. Okay, we can do the bathroom in the master bedroom, but the guest room is off limits for another 2 years or
Right.
something like that.
Yeah. Do
So
you do you help people figure out where to prioritize and
absolutely. I think, that's always the question, very usually it is the spaces they're going to use the most. So it's going to be the kitchen, it's going to be the main living room, and it's going to be the main bedroom.
Mhm,
And then the question is, unless we're focused only on a family room or, finally getting to the kids' rooms, but
mhm,
most of the time it's where can we make the biggest impact with the budget that we have?
mhm.
So yeah, that's a big piece of it.
Do you think that most people, this is a different direction. Do you think, be honest here, do most people have too much stuff and they're trying to cram too much stuff into their space?
I think that I would say that just looking at, the houses I've been in and the storage units that I've seen, we do tend to accumulate too much. I know I've certainly been guilty of that. And that I've really tried to look at that because so many of the things that we acquire have to do with memories and experiences we've had, special things that are meaningful to us that were gifts or that were heirlooms that have been inherited. And so I've really tried to develop a system for helping to better edit and cull through those things, such that because often we keep those things because we're so attached to the memory that they hold.
Yep.
And yet they may actually be creating a suffocating space for us or just too many. So, how do we define that? Maybe we don't get rid of them, but maybe we know how to pull away things and have the things that are most important to us right now, the things that most, touch our sense of belonging and our sense of identity in this moment. And so that's a tricky, but I think really important piece because, frankly, visual noise where there's too much clutter is having another impact on us that I don't think is always helpful. Some
Def
people, it's
Yeah.
really necessary for them, but not usually.
Yeah, I mean, went through one phase of my life where I began to think of, I mean, there's probably books about this and massive research. This isn't a new idea, but I began to think of my closet as a metaphor for my entire life, you know, like from the shoes to the belts to the hats to the little things that were collecting dust in shoe boxes down at the bottom corner. Um, that I had in my closet in San Francisco. Here, I had this sort of beautiful prom dress. I can't even remember where it came from, but it was from the late 50s, early 60s, and it had a lilac pattern fabric. So there were lilacs all over on a white background. And then, sort of in a serpentine fashion, snaking all over the top of it,
Wow.
were these kind of glowing, kind of flat beads. What do you call those? Like sequins. They were
Uh-huh.
like sequins, but they were very subtle. And they were threading all over this fabric. I mean, this dress was, the idea of this dress was, I don't know what it was about it, but I was enchanted by it, enchanted by it.
I
And
love it.
I wore it one time. It was not, it was just kind of an awkward dress to wear anywhere. I wore it to, I think it was my own, like a wedding related party that had a kind of retro theme. Fantastic dress, so hard to wear. And then I had it in my closet for about, I don't know, 30 years, all wrapped up beautifully. It came back from the dry cleaners and it had not only a plastic bag over it and that, the paper on the hanger, but like a whole sort of mannequin like cardboard thing underneath to support the skirt while
Wow.
you were storing it. And so there it was, taking up way too much space in my closet. And I just couldn't let it go. Eventually, I said, it has to go. It just has to go. And I think I just donated it. I don't
Mhm.
think I even tried to sell it. Why did I tell you that whole story? Um, I think because I think of myself as somebody who actually has some skills around decluttering and letting go of unnecessary, um, nostalgic objects. But, like I keep a certain amount of them.
Yeah.
That's it. But why? I just couldn't let go of this dress. There was something about the
Well,
idea
as
of
a
it.
writer, I just love the idea that this dress is such food for insight. And I'm saying that as you as a writer, I'm not
Mhm.
a writer.
Mhm.
So I think sometimes these objects can really give us a mirror that is worth diving into, is worth understanding, and what those elements are. Why is that? What is that part of us that's being revealed there? I think when we have too many of those things around us, that's when it starts to feel claustrophobic. And a lot of times, there are ways to sort of step aside from that and look at them objectively. I know there's a moment that's always interesting to me where I cannot give up something, and then suddenly I don't need it anymore.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's a fascinating piece to me. Not sure exactly what goes on there, but I
Yeah.
think that, in answer to your original question, I think that we all have more things than we need.
Mhm.
I'm not a minimalist by any sense, but I really admire minimal environments for sure, as long as they're not too cold.
Yeah, when they get too cold, I kinda worry about the people who
Mhm.
own them. It's like, what is going on in your life that there's nothing. There's, like, nothing.
Right, right.
There's not even a pillow on the sofa, right? And I'm thinking, "But wait, where are the old socks that you love and those ratty books that you've been, you know, hauling around forever? Where's all that stuff?
Were
This
you
is
sort of
weird."
you're saying, "Where are you?"
Right. Yeah. Give me some clues.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I remember I had this old boyfriend somebody I dated in high school, and then I saw him many years later, and he knew about my work as a writer and a reader, I remember I came over to the house he was renting, and he had kind of strategically placed these, books and magazines throughout the space, like, and it was so endearing that he was seriously trying to relate to me, to show
Oh.
me, that he was a reader, that he appreciated these things,
Well,
uh,
I think there's something interesting. I do this a lot where I'll put certain books in a stack, where I pass all the time, that in that moment remind me of something I want to be, inquiring about or just be reminded of or inspired by. And I find that that's a really interesting thing about libraries or just, books and magazines and journals in general is the capacity they have for reminding us of our creative selves and drawing us towards our creative selves, which I think is a really important thing. In the same way that clutter can be a way that we feel, kind of jiggy. I get kind of, nervous around too much clutter.
yep.
The enough of the things that are meaningful can reflect that sense of going deeper, that being reminded of what more there is to consider.
Right, I'm going to out myself about, like, with books. Um, I had to get my book habit under control, and now I'm down to a one bookshelf with. I have a total of maybe 6 shelves
Wow.
altogether. So the books have to fit on 6 shelves. If they don't fit, then something has to go. I've been really good about that. But I have noticed that then I'll have a little adjunct stack of books that I'm meaning to read. And sometimes, if I let them sit there long enough, I don't know, let's say it's a book on dream interpretation or something. If it sits there for 2 years, I'll kind of work out that I don't need to read that book about dream interpretation. I'm not interested after all, right? It's the funniest thing. It's like the book did its job without me even opening it. All I had to do was buy it or borrow it.
Be
And
reminded of what's inside. Yeah, no, I get that too.
uh,
Get that too.
now, so you're working with people in what I know because of my job selling houses, it's very intimate, up close and personal glimpse into people's lives. And what an honor!
Yeah,
What an
it really
honor!
is. It really is.
Um,
Because very often I'm helping people, if they're beginning a remodel, then I'm helping them to take out what has to be removed in order for a space to be redone. And in the process, usually go through all of it to decide what they don't need to keep. It's a perfect opportunity to do that. And it's an interesting space because you are allowed in to people's private lives in a way that is very privileged. And I really appreciate when people allow me to do that. It also means that I have to be very honest and very careful, because these are exactly the moments we're talking about where people don't know if they can give up things, if they can let go of things, but they know they're not going to have room or want to have room for them when everything is redone.
Right.
And
And
so these moments of transition are fascinating.
well, and then you have the dynamic. Okay, it's one thing if you're working with one person, but then a lot of times you're working with a couple,
Yeah.
usually,
Yeah.
and there can be very different agendas, very different ideas. I mean, how do you have? What do you do when you can feel a conflict or
Well, I
you
mean,
know,
that's where the therapy part of all this comes in. Like you said, I'm not a licensed therapist, but we get into these. Once you're in an intimate space with people, then you have that responsibility. And for me, I'm always looking at what serves their highest good, which they have told me in whatever way they've told me, what they want their lives to look like based on this remodel. And then also what serves the best design guide. Like if we're talking about keeping a piece of furniture or not, I'm going to give them feedback as to what I think is the best piece for what they want to achieve. So, I will always be Switzerland in the conversation, but it may lean towards one person or the other just based on what I think is the best design decision. But
yeah.
yeah, it's a tricky space to hold. And there is always going to be that conflict. So that's one thing I think in preparation always for buying in a new place, moving into a new place, remodeling a new place, or just redecorating it, is to make overt from the beginning. One, you're going to have disagreements about how you go into this and what happens as you proceed. Not everything is going to go right. There are going to be things that don't happen on schedule, so let's just be ready for that because
Yeah, for sure.
delays. And so kind of front load the possibilities so that none of this is a surprise. It still may not be desired, but it won't be a surprise.
And it still may be uncomfortable and it may upset people, but it's not a surprise. So it lessens it a little bit.
Yeah. And leave
Yeah.
room too for everyone to have a voice. That's an important space for me, is that I make sure that I've heard from everyone. I may not follow, and people may still not see what they wanted as the ultimate thing, but for everyone to feel heard, I think is extremely important.
Do you need to remind people to be respectful or thoughtful about their contractor? Or,
I think that is the role that I've played a lot, is to be in some ways a middle person. Because I think when you're emotionally engaged in what's happening with your home, it's very hard to have a business relationship with the person who's tearing it apart and putting it back together. So very often I try to be in the middle of that relationship so that everyone's needs get met, because a lot of times the contractor doesn't feel listened to, but frankly they're being paid by the client. And so how does everybody feel that they're getting what they need, and at the same time the client is the one who feels that their needs are being met at the highest level?
yeah.
So being the voice in between, I often find to be a very important position that often isn't sought after.
I think that's I think that's major. And one, I see it a lot um, in my work, and I've experienced it firsthand. Um, it is, and I have a partner who's a general contractor,
Mm.
and I see the ways. I see it with my clients, and I see it when he's talked about his work. Um, People they don't understand some of the, um, contracting work, working on houses. Um, it's not always predictable.
Right.
There's so many factors that can get in the way of, I don't care who you are, delivering on time is very hard to do when you're, dealing with laborers, trying to find materials. You're
Yeah.
waiting for those kitchen cabinets and then they arrive and one of them's broken,
Right.
right? I mean, there's so many things. Or, with painters, a lot of times. I feel like painting is one of the best, easiest, least expensive things you can do, right?
Agreed.
How many times do I hear people say, "Oh, we can just paint that ourselves."
Yeah.
Then they get too busy and they say, "Can you help us with a couple of painting bids?" And so the painter comes out and gives them a bid, and they're like, That's outrageous, right?" But just showing up, parking in San Francisco, going to the paint store, getting
Right.
the paint, doing the prep, having the skills to do it right. There's so much going on. And I think I'm blah, blah, blahing, but a lot of times people, they just don't get it. They do not get it. And I mean, for heaven's sakes, the poor gardener or, floor people are often the ones that really get dumped on, right?
Well, and finding being able to make sense of both people's positions, to be clear about budgets ahead of time, to do the research and find the best person with the best reputation at the best price. All of those things are worth the extra effort, that you may not always have time for. And at the same time, having the contractor understand where those limitations are
Right.
is really important in the beginning as well. So, and they may have some recommendations. Well, I could do it this way instead of that
Right.
way. This might help. So there's always a way that communication does help.
Yeah, and they're helping solve a problem, but your role to be in the middle of that saying, okay, contractor, you're not thinking about, for some reason, you're not thinking about whether this piece needs to be 5/8 or 3/4, or there hasn't been a decision made about this. It should be
Right.
beveled, it should be square, what should it be? And the homeowners, they're kind of like, oh, who cares, whatever. And trying to get people to pay attention to some of the details, like the
Yeah.
devil's in the details
Yeah. Well,
sometimes.
and to make those decisions in ways that are, one, thought through ahead of time so that you've got those materials chosen for the contractor when they're ready to go. And also to have done the research to find out and recommend to a client, here are the three options and three ranges of price. Here's why this or this might be better. So, kind of working both ends of it, I find a lot of times that preparation I found to be one of the strongest things, because that can create a lot of delays. If people haven't made those decisions ahead, then the contractor can't move forward because they haven't been able to order what was needed. And it's a really interesting, partnership, almost a tennis match of what has to happen before something else can happen,
It
and to
is
be one step ahead.
it is so true, because I've been caught in those vortices where it's just like, okay, homeowner, okay, contractor, and around, and then and then all of a sudden the cleaners come in from the side to say, hey, we're scheduled for today, or whatever. um I Yeah, it's a very human thing. It's a very human thing.
Well,
uh,
and the fact that in the midst of all of that, there's tremendous emotional upheaval, because the very thing that we are rooted to, which are our homes, the things that give us stability and a sense of balance and a sense of we belong here, this is where we can rest and find peace, is completely up in the air. And so, handling and caring for those emotional ups and downs while people are going through that is something that I find to be a big part of the work.
yeah, it is. I've and I'm realizing that we're starting to run short on time. I have been thinking about that a lot lately, with the things that are happening on Earth,
Mm,
with so many people experiencing displacement.
yeah,
Their homes completely uprooted from their homes, um, cast out, uh, without their olive plant, or their olive oil, or their warm winter coats, whatever it is,
yeah,
displaced and uprooted. I find myself being more mindful than before about what a privilege it is to have a home, and what a privilege it is to work with people, um, who are trying to make a home.
right.
Do you find that? Is
Oh,
that on your mind?
absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why I feel that, at the core of it is about how we care for ourselves in deeper ways rather than, focusing only on how something looks, but really wrapping those together and making sure that we've cared for the inner being as well as the outer environment.
Yeah. I love that. And you do that part so beautifully.
Thank
I so admire your work and your art. Um, the heart, the intelligence that you bring to it. It's just, it's amazing.
thank
Anyone
you
who
so
works with
much.
you.
Thank you.
Now, before we say goodbye, and you can feel free to say no, but do you have a little real estate story for us? It can be any little thing. Just
I was thinking about this. You asked me this question in the beginning, and I don't know if I have a specific one, but what I have experienced over and over and over again is this magic of having a vision for a house, watching it be completely torn apart, whether it's a room or whether it's a whole house or a cottage. And the midst of that chaos and the whole dystopia of how will this ever come together, and then watching it fall into place and actually become the space that everybody's been imagining or something more than they've been imagining. And the absolute magic of that is something that I can never get enough of. I just love that process so much. I don't like the messy part in between, but I have so much faith in the fact that what does come out of it eventually is something that has great beauty and meaning to it.
well, that's magical. That's beautiful tale that I wish for us all. And I'm thank you so much for taking time to talk with me today.
Thank you.
I think we should do it again sometime in the future and maybe augur into a different aspect of this because
I love that.
it's really noble work that you do. And do you want, I'm going to put it in the show notes, but do you want to say anything about where people can find you?
So my website is dwellbeing.design. And that is also my email, susan@dwellbeing.design. So
Okay.
you can find me there and you can set up time to chat with me if you want to find out more or set up time to do a consultation. All of those things are on the website. And I look forward to connecting with everyone.
Sounds great. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. What
Okay.
a joy.